There's power in trade secrets, more power than most people would imagine.
The product reads on the patent, right? It's not like the patent reading on the patent from a freedom to operate perspective.
Licensing is just about allocating risk. And all you're doing is allocating risk and reward and what type of risk you're willing to take on. So always work from the floor and then build on top of that.
I want to say if you have someone on the patent that's an inventor that is like over 60 or 65, that you get a discount on the track one, I think.
Holding a patent never jeopardized you. You were never in trouble owning your own patent or holding your own patent unless you told somebody, hey, I think you're infringing. If I think you're an infringer and I send you a letter that says, hey, you're infringing my patent, the problem with that is that you now have opened yourself up to what's referred to as declaratory judgment jurisdiction.
Right? You get your landscape, you really map everything out. Who are the big people? Who are the small people, right? Who's got the most expensive stuff? And then where's your little IP island, right? That you can carve out and, stake your claim, if you will, plant your flag.
They see people copying partially what they're doing, but they also don't understand if they get a patent, they don't even understand what's in it. They don't realize that if they disclose something in their patent, that doesn't mean they got a claim to it.
Do this before you file your initial patents.
The worst problem is
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Medtech Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Jones, founder at Medtech. If you've been in medtech for any amount of time, you know how important patents are, how important your IP is and your IP strategy. There is a lot of people that get it right. There are far more people that get their IP strategy wrong and don't really understand. People think it's just file. People don't know how to handle international. There's a lot of ways you can get it wrong, especially when you're going through the fundraising process. Or on the flip side, if you're a venture group or a private equity group, like them evaluating IP, there is a lot of nuance to that as well. So today we have John Behles. He's an IP strategist for medical inventors, private equity, and venture. He's a mechanical engineer by trade, worked at the USPTO, and now is in private practice. He's also the GP and co-founder of PhyCap Ventures, based out of Tulsa. That is a really interesting venture capital fund that's kind of got this physician backing, hence the name PhyCap Fund. But John's, he helps create IP strategy and plans for business owners to understand what they have, how it can be protected, and how to properly monetize their ideas and their solutions. So this is a jam-packed episode. IP, you can really get in the weeds with it. But we did a really good job of really kind of touching all these different topics around, how to do international, if you should do PCT or just do your US first, why file is not always the right strategy, when you should look to use trade secrets, how you can protect trade secrets, and how all of this kind of fits into an IP strategy that has more depth and layers and more enterprise value for your business. So I know you're gonna love this episode. It's a great one. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. John Behles, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming and joining us today. Where do we find you today?
Well, I am in beautiful, rainy Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Awesome. Is it raining there today? It's like blue sky. It's like a bluebird day in Fayetteville.
Yeah, I mean, we're, typical Oklahoma. We're end of April, start of May. We're running from tornadoes. So
dude, same.
If it rains, it stops, and then it always wakes us up at night. So
we share that crazy Midwest weather, and Arkansas had some tornadoes too recently. So
yeah, I know. It's you guys have been getting the brunt of it. It's kind of, as it's pushing out of Tulsa and onto your way, it seems to get worse. So I don't know whether to thank you for that or say I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, for the listeners, this is going to be an exclusively weather podcast.
Oh yes.
So, just kidding. So we're going to dive into a lot of really fun topics. IP law. IP as it relates to strategy for startups, for venture capital groups, for investors doing diligence, the M&A process, and how IP plays in all of that. So it's going to be a really, really fun time. And I know you do more things than IP law. Peel back the layers of the onion, as they say, John. But just for starters, kind of what gave you the itch to get into IP law?
Honestly, it was the idea of, and you'll find this amusing, I was finishing my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering at TU, and I was working as a troll inside of a nameless, faceless office at Boeing. And I got really bored, and I thought, man, I really can't spend my life behind a computer not talking to human beings.
Yeah.
I really can't do this. And then I got got into a job where I sit behind my computer and not talk to human beings. So it's not quite that. I do love the aspect of IP law because I get to interact with inventors. I get to see cool new things as they're popping onto the scene or before they pop onto the scene. Recently, I would say within the last decade, I've gotten a lot more connected and integrated with venture capital, private equity, capital allocators to kind of expand that out. So now I'm in my sweet spot. I've spent enough time in the trenches with intellectual property and developing strategies. Now my practice is more aligned with helping folks figure out their IP strategies. And so that's what I like to focus on, is helping kind of people see the bigger pictures. As you can imagine, when you go to a patent attorney and their main goal is to try to sell you patent applications. And so patent applications are great, but they're not always appropriate. And so a lot of times folks will get bamboozled into writing lots and lots and lots of applications, and they'll spend money that they should be spending in other places like marketing, advertising, other things that are more important.
I'm a big proponent on the IP side, like trying to do a lot of the work yourself. And like, of course, you're not going to like file the patent yourself probably, right? If you're not an IP attorney, but I'm just like such a big fan of like, hey, like do your own prior art literature review, right? Like you're going to learn how to do it. You're going to learn how to navigate Google Patents, but you're going to like actually understand the landscape, right? And like what's out there and be able to communicate it in a savvy way to investors. You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, you could pay Cardinal to do a report and have the attorney write up the patentability search report or whatever. But like, even then, like you still have to sink your teeth into it, or else, you know, you're going to get asked about the IP landscape by VC group or whatever. And you're going to kind of fall on your face if you don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it helps people create a functional working knowledge of what patents that are out there. It helps you identify who other big movers and shakers are in your space. It helps you find the odd things out there that you would have never expected. Landscape opinions are really good. And a lot of times, so patent law can be confusing when it comes to, there's different nomenclatures given to things and they often mean the same thing, although they have very wide different scopes than one another. I mean, for example, is just what you mentioned, the landscape, or some people confuse that with a freedom to operate, and some people use those words interchangeably. The problem is that freedom to operate is used in a much more specific sense when you need an attorney's opinion. You're worried about patents that are in that space, and you need to figure out whether what you're doing is infringing or not. And a landscape opinion, what you referred to, is kind of a broad lay of the land. So that's why it's a landscape. It helps people identify who are the big movers and shakers. What are the main patents in this area? And it helps you identify white space, gives you some ideas of this is, these guys have done it this way, these guys have done it this way, but your approach may be different. And it helps you later on in the patent process, if you ever get to it, the patent process of crafting claims that you're not going to spend a ton of money on prosecuting. And so as you can understand, and we'll get to this in just a second, this is the same thing with patentability. And there's lots of names given to patentability opinions, and people don't understand the difference between landscapes, FTOs, patentability searches, knockouts, novelty. They're going to hear all this stuff, and it's just confusing.
Yeah, for sure. While you're mentioning that, I wanted to pull this up. You talked about the white space. This is like a graphic that we made for like the Exo Medtech playbook, but this is like visually how I like to think about it. Of like, right, you get your landscape, you really map everything out. Who are the big people? Who are the small people, right? Who's got the most expensive stuff? And then where's your little IP island, right, that you can carve out and, stake your claim, if you will, plant your flag. But yeah, it's, on the FTO piece, I feel like there are a couple things that investors in the medtech space, and this, like sometimes there's medtech investors and they're really not medtech people. You know what I mean? They're money guys, right? But it seems like with angel investors too, and even some VC groups, there's a couple things that kind of tickle the androgynous zone. It's like, do you have an FTO? Have you done a pre-sub, right? And like a pre-sub they're great. Honestly, most people should do them. They're not necessary for everything, obviously. But what's your opinion on FTOs, right? Like, is it like everyone should do it, no questions asked? Is it like very case by case? What do you think?
Well, yeah, exactly. So FTOs are great. So here's my general timeline. And this means what I'm going to give you is this is the gold standard for how you go about moving down the IP roadway. Now, this is all budget driven because a lot of folks don't have the money. They don't have money to do prior art searches. They don't have money to do FTOs. They don't have money to do anything other than file applications, which is totally understandable. I mean, things are expensive and companies only have a certain amount of budget. And we can talk through the patenting process and what that looks like here in a little bit. But what I would hope people would do is they would do some general searching like you talked about just a little bit ago, a light landscape or a light FTO. So I like to keep landscapes and FTOs separate because an FTO has a very specific use. It is very much like it has a sister opinion that happens later on potentially if you get into issues called a non-infringement opinion. But the landscape is what you're going to do to help guide and see, how many folks are in this space. I like, is it worth it for me to develop and go, is the TAM small? Is it huge? What things are being addressed? What things have been done properly?
In that landscape, just ask a quick question and then let you keep going. In that landscape, you're almost saying, do this before you file your initial patents.
Absolutely. Here's the deal. If people are smart, they'll do their FTOs before they even start product development, because there's no reason to jump into a space that's littered with other bodies of dead ideas and or littered with big, huge players that are probably going to have the ability to squash you. And it all depends, again, on the product, on the market, what you're trying to bring to market. Is it a complex offering? I mean, here's the deal. It's my sliding scale. If you have a product that's like DME and does not require an F10K, maybe it requires a PDAC letter from FDA, something simple, something that maybe even doesn't need something from the FDA at all. Well, it's a sliding scale. You may not need an FTO or a landscape. It's still smart to do it. They're free tools, and a lot of these AI tools do fantastic jobs on deep searching. But if you have a product that's you're going to take clinical trials and you're going to have to implant it and you're going to have sacrificial studies done of animals and things like that, you're going to need to spend the money up front to make sure you're not frittering away money on a concept that's been tilled ground.
I think the cost is a little bit, it depends on what firm you go with, right? Like if you get a full FTO, it can run 10,000, 20,000, 80,000. It's really just about who you go with.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah. Sky's the limit.
So what I like to tell folks is upfront FTO or landscape, I like to price that out at something that's really fair, that they can eventually use those patents in sort of a patentability assessment. So their landscape actually kind of turns into their patentability opinion, so the way it works is, landscape first, patentability opinion second, then you decide whether you're going to file something and what you're going to file. And then the full FTO, the really comprehensive one, you may or may not do it, but the full FTO usually doesn't happen until you are 100% set on your design and your product and you're ready to go to market. And it just depends on the investor. Some investors will not invest without an FTO being done. Some don't even know what an FTO is.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've had a lot that like they'll ask for it, or I've seen it be asked for when people are not at design freeze and they're still like, and it's kind of like, do we need to do this right now? Like, you know what I mean? Because it's the product reads on the patent, right? It's not like the patent reading on the patent from a freedom to operate perspective. Is that right?
Yeah. And what you're doing, I mean, we don't want to go too deep into that right now because it'll derail the conversation. But a lot of people just want to they end up getting the cart in front of the horse when it comes to intellectual property. And I have battled this for 20 years and I still probably will battle it till the day I retire. I have a lot of folks that come to me and want to file. They want a provisional application. They want a non-provisional application. They just want me to file something because somebody told them that they needed to file a damn patent application. But that's not the way it works. That's a really caveman approach to doing things. But I will tell you the reason why that exists is because there is so much mythology built around intellectual property and patents. People don't know what they don't know, but at the same time, it's very frustrating because, I had an example that I can give you. This happened probably 6 months ago. I had a company that came to me that wanted to patent a bunch of stuff. And I looked at all their technology and I said, I wouldn't file patents on this. I simply wouldn't because they're an eligibility issue. If you can get them through the Patent and Trademark Office, and we can talk about eligibility later, but if you can get them through the Patent and Trademark Office, there's no way in the world they'll survive court scrutiny. And so why this company was spending money on patents, I have no idea because, first market mover advantage, great product, customers, pre-existing revenue. They had everything. They had all the boxes ticked for investment, but they just wanted patents. And one of the reasons they wanted patents is because they wanted to be able to enforce against competitors. And we can talk about that again today or at a later date. Why, if your patent strategy is I want to go and I want to enforce my patents against everybody in my space, why that is a dead loser.
Yeah, I feel like that almost feels obvious why that's like not a great business strategy. Like litigiousness as a business strategy for startups is probably bad.
Jealousy, frustration. They see people copying partially what they're doing, but they also don't understand if they get a patent, they don't even understand what's in it. They don't realize that if they disclose something in their patent, that doesn't mean they got a claim to it.
Yeah, exactly. So you're a founder and GP at PhyCap Fund. Would love if you could share more about the fund. I know there's some kind of uniqueness in terms of like the LPs that you guys were going after and kind of the strategic partners, but like if you could share share more about the fund and its focus?
Yeah. So Dutch Rojas had a brilliant idea along with Tracy Poole at 46 Ventures. They kind of birthed a venture fund that was tailored to physicians and healthcare professionals. And really what Dutch and I saw and was a main source of frustration, we started and sold, he founded a company, and I was glad to be a part of it, by the name of Sonosurgery years ago, which we did bundled surgeries. We did kind of cash pay. We were very successful. We sold out to a company by the name of Nomi Health, had a nice exit from that. But through our dealings with all these private physicians, self-employed physicians, ambulatory surgery centers, physician-owned hospitals, the real frustration was that, at least that we saw, was that they were tired of getting taken advantage of by private equity. And private equity buying up these small practices is frankly destroying the healthcare system in the United States. One of the things that's destroying it. And so our idea at PhyCap Fund was, well, why don't we just enable physicians to be their own private equity?
Yeah.
And so we have got an unbelievable team of both GPs and LPs that have joined, all physician-led. And we really want to start transforming the face of healthcare we really want physicians to be able to band together and fight against the aggressiveness of the hospital systems and the private equity systems that are driving private practice into hospital systems where they just become a cog in a wheel.
Yeah, no, there has been, I share that frustration, you and Dutch and the rest of the PhyCap team. Like there has been just such an aggressive commoditization and financialization of patient care and physician practices. And it's like everyone loses, but like also specifically like physicians, right? It's hard for them to resist, like you said. And then even like medtech companies, I feel like are getting squeezed constantly.
Well, we've got this nonsense with, Medicare going to, they see that people are getting reimbursed and they start going to competitive bidding in certain categories. And I can speak to this a little bit later if you want me to, but I'm the founder of a medical device company myself. We have a product that's coming out on the market, but I'm not preaching something to the people that I'm helping with IP strategy that I haven't done myself. We've started with concepts, ideas, reduced it to practice to a product, went through the patenting, negotiated with a large company. We're going to market with Breg, and our product should be on the shelf hopefully by the middle of the summer. But it's been an enduring process, and it's been very difficult. And so I can kind of commiserate in people's experiences with what it's like to engage with a large company. What's it like to try and go obtain patents when I had a patent examiner that I got assigned to my case that had a less than an 8% allowance rate.
Oh God.
And so I can commiserate with people when I guide them through the process and things get tough.
Yeah.
People will understand more when I say, hey, I've literally been down the road you've been down, and there is light at the tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're evaluating kind of like medtech companies or like looking at startups, potential portfolio companies, potential investments at PhyCap, if you had to boil it down, like what are 2 or 3 red flags that are like an immediate pass for you? Like regardless of like, oh, the technology's great, team's kind of good, but 2 or 3 red flags, what you see with the IP that's like, guys, we can't do this.
Oh yeah. So one of the things is I saw something on the Exo Medtech because I've encountered it myself. Folks that labor under the assumption that they have access to intellectual property that they don't actually own. And so I've seen this pop up in a lot of scenarios, especially when working with larger groups like universities. They will assume they have access because maybe they have emails or something showing hey, it's great if you guys want to use our patents or whatever. But the most dangerous thing is, one of the most dangerous things I should say, is making assumptions about whether you have rights to the intellectual property. And just because you have a license, and maybe not even a non-exclusive or an exclusive license. Exclusive license is better, but most people are not willing to grant exclusive licenses for certain reasons. But usually you will be a non-exclusive licensee. And the problem is that unless the license is drafted properly, you may not have the right to manufacture it. They may only want you to sell it. And you have to define those terms inside the license agreement. So I see people that have faulty license agreements. I see people almost every time, and I will tell you this because we deal with early stage, I see folks that have not really thought about their IP strategy and not talking about patents. They have done a technological assessment of their company altogether. And when I talk about an IP strategy, I mean IP, I don't mean patent. And so what that entails is I will usually spend the better part of a day with a company assessing their technology, talking to all their SMEs, talking to all of their programmers, their engineers. And then I will create, after we have done that, a comprehensive plan, an IP strategy plan for the company, because what you have to do is you have to differentiate between what things should be disclosed and what things should not be disclosed. And there's ways to write patents that you don't have to disclose the secret sauce of the company when you're to be able to get patent protection. And patent protection is important, but give me 2 seconds to tell you a short example. I had a technology company that came to me not too long ago. Now, this isn't the Medtech space, but they were a cybersecurity company and they had no patents. They'd never filed any patents, but the company clearly had tech trade secrets. And so I was able to do this strategy with them, and they were frustrated because they wanted to raise some money. And so I said, hey, let me put together an IP strategy for you and then help us differentiate between some trade secrets and maybe you do have patentable stuff that you don't recognize. And so we did this process. I was able to create a comprehensive strategy for them, and then they took this strategy that I created for them and went to an IP valuation firm and got a $50 million valuation for the company.
Wow.
So there's power in trade secrets. There's, in fact, more power than most people would imagine. If you're in the health tech space and you deliver anything, you deliver something from a tech basis, not from a hardware basis, meaning that you don't have an implant or whatever, a piece of software or something that guides, if it's AI, whatever. If your process happens in a black box and no one would be able to reverse engineer it, those things are best kept trade secret. And so, especially in the environment that we're in today with subject matter eligibility and abstract rejections and the court's hostility to software patents, it's absolutely best to keep it trade secret.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like market mover and all of that stuff is like the bigger advantage. You know what I mean?
It is absolutely. Revenue's number one.
Yeah. A lot of the times, I mean, you see some rare cases and things when it's like very, very specific, technical, unique, bespoke, or PMA technology or whatever. But like a lot of the times what they're buying is revenue and channels, right? And surgeons and all that stuff. And people forget that. So talking about like licensing as an exit strategy, you know, a little bit, what in your mind are kind of the main advantages and disadvantages of like, you know, when startups want to license their technology? What should founders watch out for when they're structuring licensing agreements? And I think you mentioned like making sure they have the rights they think they do, but anything else around?
No, the absolute biggest thing is if you're going against a big company with a sophisticated group of lawyers that are going to be negotiating on their side, you absolutely, probably the most important part of your patent strategy is paying for counsel to deal with your license agreements. Because what sounds good on paper, once it's sliced and diced, and companies will, let me give you one example. They set their own unique royalty rates per type of product. So large company that does spinal implants, they're going to license your technology, and they have pretty standard rates that they're going to give everybody as a standard royalty rate. But where it gets sliced and diced is in things like add back. Do you have to, are you responsible if there's product liability? Are you responsible? And where really people get hung up and where they really get hung out to dry is on negotiating the terms of how their royalties actually calculated. And people, you know, they don't really pay attention to words like gross or net. But when that word net is in there, run to the hills. Because net is going to be, the company will have subtracted out so many things to get to a net profit number that you, for example, if you sell a brace for, or you sell a pedicle screw for $1,000, the problem is by the time they discount for marketing, for manufacturing, for tariffs, for moving this thing, you know, printing it in China or, you know, whatever it is, manufacturing it wherever, and then putting it on a container, by the time it gets to America, and by the time they paid sales and marketing and paid the rent and everything else, there's about $3 left out of that $1,000. And great, you get 7% of that $3 out of the $1,000. So when you're negotiating these things, it's best to just pick a floor number or pick a gross revenue number. The floor number to me is so much easier. That's what I negotiated for my company, was a floor number saying, we know what you're selling to the physician for. We know roughly what your margins are. And if the company's not going to share with you those details, they're probably not the right company anyway. But if they share everything with you, then you can pick a number and go, hey, what can I live with dollar per unit? And really you set that as the floor. And then you can add on top of that, say, hey, if we hit 5,000 units, it increases increases it by this. If we hit 50,000 units, it increases it by this. So always work from a floor and then build on top of that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. I negotiated, was doing a licensing agreement for a product, and I'm trying to think back like the things that were big sticking points. I think there's always a balance with like upfront.
The warranties and indemnification are usually the biggest ones.
Yeah. The product liability was like a big one. Patent defense was another big one. Like whether that's shared or whatever. And I'm curious to get your take on this. If you could briefly, like, there's an element of like, hey, we're licensing their IP, but it's ultimately up to us to build the product kind of that leverages that IP. And then if someone sues us, it's going to be because our product that we made infringed on their patent, right? And so we basically came up with something that was like, to the effect of like, hey, if we develop a feature or something that's like not disclosed in the IP, then like we will pay for all of the cost of that. But if it's like, we'll split the cost if it's like something that's disclosed in your IP and it's like core to the, core to the patent, core to the claims, etc. Does that make sense?
And I think what you highlight is a very good example of each one of these is bespoke. And you're going to have terms that, and here's for anybody that's watching or listening to this, remember this about all contract law, and licensing is just contract law. Licensing is just about allocating risk. And all you're doing is allocating risk and reward and what type of risk you're willing to take on.
Yeah.
And so remember that, when you agree and decide not to, fully read your contract and agree to indemnify them for all third-party infringement, well, why would you do that? So I have an instance that I can share with you. So there's a company that developed a product. They went to license it with another company, and in between they did some, just like you said, they did some improvements to the product. And the company B decided that they wanted to patent this thing that they improved, and company A had the base technology. But then the license agreement, which I negotiated, said, hey, like, this is great, but we're going to give you indemnification for stuff that we created, but the things that you decided to add to it, that's on you.
Yeah.
If the combination of my old stuff and your new stuff results in third-party infringement, you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's not reasonable for me to take that on, and that's why these things are really important. These are just one or two little things that could absolutely destroy a company in a licensing negotiation.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know a question that a lot of companies have is around like international protection and like, how aggressively should they go after that? How important is it? I'll give you kind of my general theory of the case, and you can tell me how it's horribly wrong. I mean, I've seen a trend of people doing PCT first instead of just doing a US provisional first, or, US non-provisional first.
Which I'm a fan of, and I'll explain to you why in just a second. It's great and it's bad. Depends. Everything depends.
Yeah. And so my general theory is, as long as you've got, you're holding to the priority date and you still have kind of access to the priority date, you kind of push it out as far as you want to, and then pick the top 4 or 5 countries where the market is large enough, and then there's a significant chance of it really even ever being manufactured there as well. But go on market, go on like, would anybody ever manufacture this here? And just pick those, do the designation through, I think it's like the Paris Cooperation. Pick those 4 or 5, move forward with those, take your time, run the clock a little bit. But beyond that, like, I don't think we've got a patent in Zimbabwe. Fuck, cool. You know what I mean?
Great.
That's
I don't
my
think they have a court to enforce it in, but yeah.
But that's my general theory. Tell me what's right, what's wrong about that.
No, it's actually really good. And so I will tell you, that's a more astute question, and most attorneys in the United States haven't even thought about the implications of starting PCT first. And you can guess why. It's because they don't make money doing PCT only. Yeah. So it's delayed money for them. So usually the way it works is you file a non-provisional application in the United States. Within 12 months, or most people file them on the same date, because if you're claiming priority to a provisional, you'll need to. But they file their PCT on the same day, or within the 12-month period, will file the PCT along with their non-provisional application. So patent attorney gets to charge for the non-provisional application, patent attorney gets to charge for the PCT. So, and most people don't realize, but little to nothing gets done between the PCT and the non-provisional application, but you get charged out the ass for it. And so most of the fees associated, most of the costs associated with the PCT is actually the filing fees, and then the international search report that you have to pay for, which will run you around, well, I don't want to give anybody a number because they change all the time, just like the fees at a trademark office change all the time. But what I will tell you is
understanding your ideal customer profile is tough in and of itself, but even once you get there, how do you identify the specific surgeons and physicians that are going to be the most likely to buy, purchase, fight for your device based on what they're doing in their own practice? What I use is Alpha Sophia. I've been using it for over 2 years. It's an incredible intelligent data platform. They have Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial payer data, so you can see CPT, DRG volumes for all the procedures they're doing, trends over time. You can see where they're practicing, different site locations of care. You can even see where they went to school, open payments data. The physician profiles are gorgeous, and it really helps you translate your understanding of your ideal customer profile into better targeted sales list, better funnels for your sales team to go out and execute on, so they're not just spraying and praying. I can't tell you enough how it's changed, our approach in sales and marketing to just hoping for the best to really working through a defined high value target list that's going to be game changers for our business when we win that business. So if you're scaling a business, if you're just a startup, there's plans that Alpha Sophia has that can fit your budget. If you're interested at all in leveling up your sales funnel, leveling up your sales and marketing team, go to alphasophia.com and check them out today.
PCT First is interesting because a lot of people take advantage of Track 1 at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which allows you to move to the front of the line if you pay this exorbitant like $2,000 fee. And so if you do that, they guarantee you that you'll get a disposition on your patent, which means at least reach a final rejection within 12 months. So most people think, well, that's not great. Here's the deal. Your patent is likely to not get its first office action for 24 months.
Yeah.
So 2 years have elapsed before you hear anything about your patent. So Track 1's great, not the way to go. You can take that same amount of money and instead of pissing it away on a Track 1, you can file a PCT application and you can pay for an ISR, which is a much more comprehensive and it's a better search than they ever do at the Patent and Trademark Office. No offense, USPTO, but you're great. And so you get that, and you can select to have the USPTO be the searching authority, although it goes to folks like Cardinal and people like that do search reports. But once you have that done, within 3 to 4 months of filing your application, you get this thing called an international search report.
Yeah.
If they find no references, no what's called X and Y or A references, you can actually file something called a patent prosecution highway request back into the United States and file a 371 national stage application and get your patent allowed in 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
So now, which is more appealing to you? So you filed a non-provisional application with a Track 1 in the US, great, you got the United States. You filed your PC, now you've got 150 countries.
Yeah, and that's really sage advice there. And on the Track 1 piece, if you are just like really amped up and wanting to do it, and maybe this is for Track 1 and